All right, it is 6:01 p.m. and I will call the West Richland City Council meeting to order for October 1, 2024. Mayor Gary is on vacation, and so I am filling in for him as Mayor Pro Tem. Before we get started, I'll ask Stephanie to read the hybrid meeting rules and then call roll, please.
All right, thank you. Tonight's meeting will be held in person with a virtual meeting component. If you are participating virtually, please make sure the name shown at the bottom of your video view is the name you would like the Mayor Pro Tem to use. You can change this by right-clicking on your video view and selecting Rename. Audience members present in the council chambers will be called upon first during public comment periods. Those participating remotely should virtually raise your hand if you wish to speak. To virtually raise your hand, click on Participants and then click on Raise Hand. If you are participating by phone only, press *9 to raise your hand. Please limit comments to 3 minutes. Okay, roll call. Richard Bloom,
Here.
Fred Brink,
Here.
David Fetto,
Here.
May Hayes,
Here.
Kate Moran,
Present.
John Smart,
Here.
Joker,
Here.
and as Mayor Pro Tem Brink stated, Mayor Gary is on vacation.
Council, may I have a motion to approve Mayor Gary's absence?
So moved.
Second. All in favor? All right. Aye. Any opposed? All right. Councilmember Moran, would you please lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance? Pledge allegiance to the flag, the United States of America, and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you, Councilmember Moran. Council, the agenda is before you. We do need to remove agenda item 6I, India, resolution 59-24, executing a PSA with the city of Richland. There's been some updates to the agreement that need to be incorporated, and staff needs more time to accomplish these changes. Also, Councilmember Smart has requested to remove item 6J, as in Juliet, from the consent agenda, and we will move that item to 8E, as in Echo. Are there any other changes to the agenda? Hearing no other changes to the agenda, may I have a motion to approve the agenda as amended?
I move to approve the agenda as amended.
Second. I have motion and a second. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? All right, motion passes unanimously. So we'll start with presentation. We have the 2024 second quarter financial presentation by Financial Director Erin Gwynn. Ms. Gwynn, floor is yours.
All right. Thank you, Mayor Pro Tem Brink. Good evening, Council. This evening, I'm presenting the 2024 second quarter financial report. I'll start with an overview and economic update, followed by specific financial information regarding the general fund, followed by the other funds. For the first overview of the economy slide, we'll start with unemployment, which has decreased to 4.3% for Benton County. This is down from 6.6% in my first quarter report. Another economic indicator we continue to monitor is inflation. One of the measures used is a consumer price index, which nationally has a 12-month percentage increase of 3% when comparing June of 2023 to June of 2024. This is down from 3.5% in my first quarter report. The Seattle Metro is a bit higher at 3.8, but also down from 4.3. The trend is a positive direction. Looks like we're evening out in this way. So locally, we look at the city's building activity. Single-family permits issued through second quarter were down 6% from the same time period, with 34 new single-family permits issued. Multifamily permits for second quarter are up 77% through the second quarter, with 39 permits issued totaling 169 units. In terms of revenue generated, the city received 39% more building permit revenue than last year's second quarter. This is another view of the single-family home permits. This shows the years in comparison along with the green line showing the increase in valuation. This is, again, just a great example of the volatility. Our permits are flattening out, but you can see they're still way down from our peak in 2021. This next several slides, we'll look at specific details regarding the general fund. This slide shows where the money comes from in terms of budget. You can see most of the general fund is generated from taxes at 68%. The primary sources are sales tax, property tax, and utility taxes. Here's a view of the general fund revenues collected. The city collected 11% more revenue in 24 compared to 2023. A large part of this increase is due to building revenue. When reviewing trends, it's important to look at how we're doing compared to what was budgeted. In addition to the year-to-year changes, this slide compares the budget to what was collected through second quarter of 2024. The general fund collected approximately 80% of budgeted revenues. And again, we're looking at collecting at least 75% at the end of the second quarter in this category. So the city is on target for our biennium. These next two slides look at sales tax revenue in the general fund. As shown in previous slides, sales tax decreased 4% compared to the prior year. This other view compares the different business sectors. The retail sector decreased 2% and represents 39% of total sales tax collected by the city. Construction is another large sector, which also decreased by 12% and represents 22% of sales tax collected in the city. Another major revenue source in the general fund is the utility taxes. Overall, utility tax revenue increased 3% compared to 2023. So here's another look at utility tax. Water, sewer, storm, and garbage taxes all saw increases, which is primarily due to rate increases. Electricity and gas saw a decrease, but 2023 was abnormally high. If you look at the graph and compare the 2024, or like the red bar, to 2022, you'll see it's pretty much normalized. Telephone and cable are the smaller utilities, and both saw decreases. Another major general fund revenue source is property tax, which increased 3% compared to the same period in the prior year. The majority of property tax is collected in the second and fourth quarters. So where does your money go? Most expenses in the general fund are for public safety at 41%. This is a change from previous budget cycles, as I've stated previously, and the big change is the big number of the transfer out at 15%, which is the Well 3 project, and the increased support to the street fund. Here's another look by department on where the money goes. Total general fund expenditures were 59% of the biennial budget. As a general guide, we're looking for 75% or less in this area. The city has special revenue funds for streets, park impact, criminal justice, and the library. This graph displays the major revenue sources for each fund. The street fund saw a decrease. The library fund and criminal justice fund saw moderate 3% increases. The park impact is impacted by the increased building activity. While the city has a mitigation agreement for 2 of our larger subdivisions, the 39 multifamily permits issued did collect park impact fees, which is what is you're seeing the increase. So this is a picture of the special revenue fund expenditures. Most funds have remained flat with the exception of the criminal justice fund. And this has increased primarily due to the new leased police vehicles that were ordered in November of 22 and finally arrived early of 2024. And we're now paying for them this year. In addition to the vehicles, there have been increased operating costs associated with the hiring of an additional administrative professional mid-2023, and that is utilizing the public safety tax funds. Next, we'll look at our capital project funds. This slide outlines the funds and their purpose. Fund 301 holds the State Route 224 project, as well as real estate excise tax, or known as REIT 1. Fund 302 is REIT 2 funds, primarily for pavement preservation. This fund houses projects such as the North 62nd Preservation Project. I think that was completed in 23. Fund 315, this is where the bond funds were accounted for to construct the new police station. This project is wrapping up, and we'll look at closing this fund by the end of this year. Fund 355, the Transportation Improvement Program, is where we account for several transportation improvement projects, including the Bombing Range Road Keene intersection, which was completed in 2023. For revenues for project funds, there wasn't a lot of activity for our police facility fund. This project is winding down. Both Fund 301 and 355 have large capital projects that are receiving state and/or federal funds, which is why you see revenue activity in those. So the primary source of funding for funds 301 and 302 come from real estate excise tax. We saw a 36% increase in the collection compared to the second quarter of last year. The bottom two portions of the graph, the blue and the red, of this graph reflect what the city has received through the second quarter. If you look at the lighter blue or teal portion, the 2024 bar, this reflects what is budgeted for the remainder of the year. So we're on target. Revenues for Fund 355 are for traffic impact fees. This city saw increases in collections compared to the first half of last year. The large increase is primarily due to the increased building activity, specifically the large multifamily housing projects being developed. This graph shows expenditures for capital project funds for the second quarter. Not a lot of activity through the second quarter. However, activity is picking up in Fund 301 with the State Route 224 project. These last few slides will take a closer look at our utility funds. For revenue, water collections increased 17%. There are approximately 5,790 water utility accounts billed at the end of June of 24. Sewer collections increased 9%, primarily due to the increase in the number of new residences in the last year, as well as increased rates. Here's an image of irrigation. Irrigation collections decreased 1% through second quarters of 24. This is mostly because it's a small utility and the timing of payments were received. This graph displays stormwater collection revenue up 35% compared to the second quarter of 23. This is due to the increased rates as well as the number of increasing residents. And the last utility revenue, solid waste collections up 11%, primarily due to rate increases and additional residential development. This final slide is a view of the expenditures. Most saw operating costs remain steady except for the solid waste and the water utility. Are there any questions?
Council, any questions for Financial Director? Councilmember Moran.
Thank you. Yes. Thank you very much for the presentation. And I'm wondering, just kind of looking at what we have coming up later in the meeting, could you say which funds specifically the monies that go towards the Indigenous Defense Funds come from? Is that from general fund or is that criminal justice?
What item?
The item, so in the meeting later under number 10 for new business, we're going to discuss the public defense caseload standards. And in it, it talks about the cost to cities for that we pay into the Indigenous Defense Fund. And I was wondering which of the funds that we have does that come out of for us?
Most likely general fund, possibly the criminal justice fund, but I think the majority of it is in general fund.
Okay, thank you.
Councilmember Bloom.
Um, On your slide, you're talking about the property tax. The property tax was up 3%. Now, that's for the biennium or
That's comparing last year's
this year.
second quarter.
so that
to-
means the property values went up 2% of new construction?
Not necessarily, because it's,
We're capped at 1%.
well, the revenue is capped at 1%. So, but then you add the new property that makes up that difference.
Right,
So,
but that would be
yes.
2% increase for
Mhm.
the overall property value of the city.
Yes. It could be more though. Because yes, because you could still have property assessments, so of existing homes go up, but it's not, that going up does not increase the 1%. So the value of the property could actually go more than,
Could be the assessment aspect.
yes.
Councilmember Stoker.
Sorry, I think I missed this while I was writing my question down, so sorry for making you repeat this. But the park impact fee increase was based on what again? I didn't quite catch it.
So last year, we really didn't collect a lot because of the mitigation agreements. This year, all the multifamily housing coming in does not have any mitigation agreement, so they're paying into it. And so that's primary source.
No other questions. Thank you very much for the presentation, Ms. Gwynn. Appreciate the information. Council will now move on to the consent agenda. Consent agenda tonight includes approving the minutes from the regular meeting of September 17, Ordinance 20-24, amending Appendix A of Ordinance 02-10, relating to mitigation of development impacts on the city's transportation system. Resolution 53-24, amending master fee schedule, water system development fee, water line development fee, and water connection hookup fee. Resolution 54-24, amending master fee schedule, water service charges. Resolution 55-24, amending master fee schedule, sanitary sewer connection fees, sewer line development fee, and sewer disposal, private permit and inspection fee. Resolution 56-24, amending master fee schedule, park impact fee. Resolution 57-24, amending master fee schedule, solid waste service rates. Resolution 58-24, amending master fee schedule, special events permits. And finally, Resolution 61, 24, relating to surplus equipment. A motion authorizing the mayor to enter a memorandum of understanding with Ben Franklin Council of Governments, Benton County, City of Kennewick, City of Richland, and City of Pasco for a regional approach to climate change planning. I have a motion authorizing city to apply for Washington State Department of Commerce Periodic Update Grant, and also motion to approve the interagency agreement, Washington State ICAC Task Force and West Richland Police Department. Seeing no one from the audience present tonight, I'll turn to the virtual attendees. Is there anyone that would like to comment with regard to the consent agenda? If so, please raise your virtual hand. City Clerk will unmute you. I kindly request you state your name and residence for the record and provide any comments. You may also press *9 to raise your hand via telephone. I don't see anyone. Stephanie, do you see anyone?
I do not.
Seeing no one, council, may I have a motion to approve the consent agenda?
I move to approve the consent agenda.
Second.
I have a motion and a second. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, say nay. No opposed, motion carries. Thank you. We now have the first opportunity for citizen public comments for items not on the agenda. If you wish to provide comments, please come to the podium. Well, there is no one to come to the podium, so I will turn to our virtual attendees. If there's anyone attending virtually who would like to make a public comment with regard to items not on the agenda, now's the time to do it. I would ask that you please raise your virtual hand. City Clerk will unmute you, and you will have 3 minutes to provide your comments. Once again, I ask that you please provide your name and address for the record, and kindly limit your comments to 3 minutes. You may also press *9 to raise your hand via telephone. I see no one attending virtually who wishes to make public comment. Stephanie, do you see anyone?
I do not see anyone, no.
Seeing no one, we'll move on to ordinances, resolutions, motions, and public hearings. First public hearing is rezone 0001-2024. Pat Hardy. Items 8A and 8B are a public hearing and an ordinance to approve rezone application 0001-2024. Community Director Development Mendenhall. Director Mendenhall will present the staff report. I'll get it right, Eric.
That's okay. It is a hard one. I'm going to let Jessica start us out.
Okay.
Sorry about that, Mr. Mayor Pro Tem. This is a closed record public hearing, quasi judicial in nature, so I do need to read the closed meeting ground rules. Sorry, open public record hearing, but still quasi judicial. So the purpose of this public hearing is for the city council to consider the pertinent facts applicable on to make a final decision on the rezone 001-2024 at the request of Pat Harvey. The appearance of fairness doctrine applies to this hearing, as I mentioned, which requires that the hearing be fair in form, substance, and appearance. So not only must it be fair, but it must also appear to be fair. At this time, I would like to ask council a few questions to ensure that the record is clear that this is, in fact, a fair hearing. Has any member of the council engaged in communication with opponents or proponents regarding this issue outside of the public hearing process?
No.
Will any member of the council obtain any financial benefit or suffer a financial loss as a result of the outcome of this hearing?
No.
Is there any member of council who believes that he or she cannot hear and consider this application in a fair and objective manner?
No.
And is there any member of the public, proponent or opponent, who objects to the participation of any of the council members in hearing this matter? I do not hear any.
I do not see anyone indicating any concern virtually. All right, thank you. Mr. Mendenhall, please.
Thank you, Mayor Pro Tem Brink, members of the council. This evening before you is a request for a rezone of property located in Section 8. It's lot 173. It's on the corner of Mount Adams View and Champion. Just for some historical reference as well, just last year, or actually I think it was maybe earlier this year, council approved the rezone of the property directly south of this lot. And this lot is now the property owner of this piece is asking for the same rezone that was granted previously. So staff's reviewed this. There's a whole big long staff report in here that I'm going to save us all from having to go through since we have a packed meeting all tonight. I teased Aaron we should probably bring cannabis back so we can get more attendance, but maybe not. So I've reviewed this application to the comprehensive plan, also barring or knowing that we've approved the rezone directly to the south. The merits are the same. I didn't receive any public comment on this. I did send out public notice to all of the neighbors in the area and did not receive any public comment on it, nor did anyone show up to the planning commission meeting to provide public comment. In opposition, the applicant did show up in favor of this. And granting this would help with the more thoughtful development of those two properties. And I do believe that the two property owners may work together to develop the two at the same time. So there's some cost efficiencies there. Not that that has a huge to do with approving it this evening, but the merits are stand on the same for both the one that's been previously approved and the one that's this evening. Staff recommends approval. The Planning Commission held a public hearing, as I stated, and they are recommending you approve this as well. And I would be happy to answer any questions that you may have.
Oh, thank you, Mr. Mendenhall. I will now open the public hearing at 6:26 p.m. We'll hear in-person comments first and then virtual comments. Seeing as we have no one here in person, I will turn to virtual comments. If there's anyone attending virtually who would like to provide a comment, please raise your virtual hand. City Clerk will unmute you and you will have 3 minutes to provide your comments. I once again ask that you please state your name and city of residence for the record. You may also press *9 to raise your hand via telephone. Is there anyone who would like to make a comment that is attending virtually? I see no one raising their hand. Stephanie, do you see anyone?
I do not.
Seeing no one, I'll close the public hearing at 6:27 p.m. And I will ask for council for a motion.
I move to approve ordinance 21-24 to rezone parcel number 1-0898-302-0173000 from residential medium RM10 to residential medium RM6, based on the conclusions and findings contained within the staff report and adopt the updated zoning map.
Second.
I have a motion and a second. Council, are there any questions that have not been previously addressed in the staff report or with Mr. Mendenhall's discussion? Councilmember Smart.
Yeah, Mr. Mendenhall, I just wanted to ask if we know how the road plan will play out with this new rezone. I see that to the north, there are similar lots with a road going straight through them. Or will that road connect to the property to south as well? Or how's that going to work? Do we know?
We don't know yet, and that's partly why this gentleman wanted to get this rezoned so that the alignment could be more easily made. RM10 might shift lots around a little bit if he was to develop that to the north versus the RM6 that's directly to the south. So having that continuity would help align that road more effectively.
So the property directly to the south is zoned
RM6.
Okay. And what this is going to be as well. So the property to the southwest that I see on the overhead imagery shows something like 20 driveways. Do we have an inkling as to how this RM6 parcel that we're talking about tonight will be developed? Will it be like that, or will it be like the one directly to the west that has, I think, 8 lots on it?
I don't have any information from them yet on this and how it will be.
So it could be either.
It could be either. Yep.
Okay. Or it could be 6,000 square foot lots with homes on them. We just don't know. Okay.
Correct.
I'm smiling at that. Thank you. All right.
Any other questions? Seeing none, council. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed, say nay. Motion passes. Move on to the next item of business. Ordinance 22-24, creating West Richland Municipal Code Section 5.16 relating to special events. This is an ordinance amending the West Richland Municipal Code to add regulations for special events. City Clerk Stephanie Haug will present the staff report.
All right, thank you. So every year, the City of West Richland participates in an audit performed by our insurance provider, WCIA. These audits look at areas of liability, and WCIA makes recommendations on how to reduce the liability risk for the city. Last year, the city did an audit for events within the city. At that time, we did not have any adopted criteria for allowing such events within city limits. The purpose of these regulations is to create a process for notification to the city of proposed events and creates criteria to ensure that public health and safety are met during the proposed event. The ordinance was based on language provided by WCIA and has been reviewed by both the CD subcommittee as well as our city attorney, Jessica Foltz. After some revisions, the ordinance presented to you in this packet was recommended for adoption from the CD subcommittee.
Thank you, Ms. Haug. Seeing no one again in the council chambers, I will turn to any members attending virtually who would care to make comments. If you wish to make a virtual comment, once again, please raise your virtual hand. City Clerk will unmute you and you will have 3 minutes to provide your comments. Please state your name and city of residence and kindly restrict your comments to 3 minutes. Press *9 to raise your hand via telephone. I see no one attending virtually who wishes to comment. Stephanie, do you see anyone?
I do not see anyone with their hand up, no.
Seeing none, council, do I have a motion?
I move to approve ordinance 2224, an ordinance of the city of West Richland, creating West Richland Municipal Code 5-16 related to special events.
Second?
I have a motion and a second. Council, do you have any questions that were not addressed either in the written documentation provided or by Ms. Haug's presentation? Councilmember Bloom.
I guess I'm a little perplexed. I'm not, I understand the aspect of this, but I'm just wondering if we aren't taking on more liability by approving the safety aspects that we're not that good. Well, I'm talking about to foresee all the potential safety aspects. So are we blessing them and increasing our liability? I guess it's more a question for Jessica.
I think there's a generalized standard of care that cities are to attempt to assure public safety when people have events in our communities. I don't think we really have the option to turn a blind eye if we know that events are going on that might impact public safety or city services. I think nearly every city in Washington that's of a certain size has some sort of special event regulation for that purpose. And in fact, the impetus for this was that it came up on our audit that we didn't have anything. So I guess with the answer to that question being WCA, who insures us against risk, is recommending these changes because what we had was not sufficient. So.
I understand, but you understand my perplexity is that we really can't, for a special event, are we holding ourselves to a certain level of investigation of the approval of that event? That's really my concern is staff time that we would have to commit to it.
Yeah, it will involve staff time, and frankly, the way it usually works is when we get a special event application, the way it should work, that impacts other departments, public works, police, fire, right? It gets sent around to those departments to look at any risk. As far as, what the level of care is, I don't practice that type of law, but WCA does, right? And they hire lawyers to do that. So I guess my point is, yes, are we perfect? Are we going to, miss something? Maybe, but right now we're flying by the seat of our pants, so to say.
Well, I guess from that standpoint, WCIA is covering our shortcomings.
They are, and that's why the audit informed us that we needed to adopt a policy.
Thank you.
Councilmember Stoker.
Yes, thank you. I guess my first observation is that to me, this seems like something that would be perfect example of a first reading. I'd probably prefer to have had a first reading versus trying to pass the ordinance tonight. But that's just my observation and my personal preference. Secondly, in an effort to try and understand the scope of all of this, there's a set of exemptions here, which maybe what I'm looking for is part of exemption B, private events not open to the public that do not impact public health or safety, traffic, sanitation, emergency services, or other necessary services. But my church does a lot of public events. We just did one down at Flat Top Park. Easily 500 plus people there, I guess. We also have youth dances that are open to everybody. Youth, not adults, sorry. But they happen once or twice a month. They're all over the Tri-Cities. We have one here in West Richland, so we may have one every few months. And, you know, there's 400 or 500 kids easily at these. And there was a stipulation about needing an officer for every 100 people at an event. Does that mean the church now needs to get security services for 5 security members to conduct security at these events? So I'm trying to see where some of these exemptions fall and how that affects a lot of activities that are going on.
Thank you. So essentially, any event that is, I say, open to the public, so not privately invited or, you know, you're advertising just to, I say, if it's open to church members, so it's only advertised to members of the church, then they would be exempt for this. But if this is a general invitation for the public, there is an expectation that certain public health and safety measures will be put in place. And I know that it seems very, and it probably is very innocent of having a public dance, but the comparison to that is a nightclub. So that is a high risk event that has opportunity for impacts on public safety. And so where these regulations, they kind of ramp up in intensity of the type of events. So like a music festival is probably going to be more intense than other types, you know, say it like the market or the public event at the Flat Top Park. So as it gets to be more intense of an event, there's more regulations and more review. But the intent is to ensure that, so say you're congregating 500 people, where are they going to park? Where are they going to go to the bathroom? How are they disposing of garbage that's created by congregating 500 people? That's what the intent of these regulations is.
Okay. But I guess, you know, as an example, there was an exemption specifically called out for dance halls, which to me is usually a private function. And so to me, it's kind of confusing to have a specific exemption called out in that instance, whereas a church dance for youth would not necessarily get that same exemption call. So to me, I just think there's some kludginess in the way it's structured and how the exemptions are put together. So that's why I think it would be nice to have had an opportunity for a first reading and some more discussion on, you know, these exemptions and everything. Another one that I saw was, you know, under C, the definitions, it says demonstrations means a gathering or assembly of 50 or more people. So where did the number 50 come from also? It seems kind of arbitrary. So anyway, those are just my thoughts.
Councilmember Smart?
Yes, I was on the subcommittee that reviewed this and made several suggestions, most of which were deleted, a couple of which maybe were sort of adopted. One of the, last time we met, there were a couple remaining concerns, which I don't know what the conclusion was. So I guess at this point, since we're all the way to the point of making a vote on this, I'll direct your attention to 16.040 definitions. And we had this discussion about demonstration means a gathering or assembly of 50 or more people upon the public right-of-way, public park, place, or facility for the purpose of demonstrating, protesting, informing, or persuading. So I'm reading off of a printout. I don't have it on my computer right now. I'd have to re-log in, but if that's what yours says on your we had this discussion about the grammatics of this, if that's a word. In other words, it says assembly of 50 or more people upon the public right-of-way, public park. And then I was suggesting that we say specifically public place or public facility, because if it just says place, then a demonstration means that if I have 51 people in my backyard to celebrate Groundhog Day, that becomes a demonstration and it's no longer a public place. So there was just grammatical, like why not put the word public to be specific, that we're talking about public places in this case and not just any place. So a person can read it both ways. It is just simply a point that I made to try to clarify and hone the language so that there's no confusion about having 51 people in my backyard celebrating Groundhog Day
I
being
think,
considered a demonstration. So maybe I'll just leave that
Yeah.
one to Jessica, and I've got one
let's
more
turn
like
it
it.
to our attorney for her comment, please.
Thank you.
So I reviewed your proposed changes. Part of the reason that I removed some of the references to public is because we may, depending on the nature of the event, need to require a permit for something on private property. If it has a certain number of people, if it implicates one of the other risk factors. And going back to Councilmember Stoker's point, most of the time, if people want to have an event on their private property and it's properly zoned for that, be our guest. But at the point where it starts to interfere with city services, that's when we have an obligation to ensure that the impact to the public is minimized. So I was reluctant to specify that this only applies to public property because there are scenarios where it could occur on private property. I think you're right that most of the time it is on public property because the whole point generally is to get attention and have their voice heard, right? But the concern with wording this so specifically is we can't possibly anticipate every fact scenario of something that could occur. And if our code says, oh, it says public property, so this demonstration's on someone's lawn, it has 300 people, there's refuge everywhere, they're blocking the street. But we don't want that scenario. So that's part of why I recommended that we not define it that way.
So I like what you just said, because you point out that the things we're trying to mitigate here are things like leaving refuge on the ground and having a place so they don't have public urination going on and the streets aren't blocked and we don't block traffic. The thing is, my comment to the subcommittee on this was that we already have laws for all of that. You're not allowed to block the road. You're not allowed to litter. You're not allowed to do all sorts of nasty things in the public. And so this seemed, I also like what Councilmember Bloom said about this, and that this definitely, to me, seems like it adds liability to our city by making some preconception that we are somehow able to or have any agreement with the public to quote unquote assure their safety. We have no such capability, nor does any city in the world that I know of have that capability. So, if there was, I wouldn't want to live there. So the precept of this, the fact that this is the insurance company asking us to do this really is perplexing, because it sure seems like we are implying strongly that somehow if we review an activity and give a $25 permit or whatever the price was, that somehow we've now, covered these citizens with a blanket of safety that in fact they may or may not really have. So when something does go wrong, if a riot breaks out or something terrible, I don't know. I would have rather have just rested on the laws that we have that say you're not allowed to break store windows or set things on fire. And if you do, we're going to arrest you and throw you in jail. So that this whole concept, and the fact that it involves private properties, is very disturbing. And even if I keep my Groundhog Day celebration, below the number of 50, if I go to 51, I have to get a permit. Is that not correct? I have to actually apply to the city upwards of 7 days, or would it be considered a, you know, I mean, is that we, under exemptions, there's events conducted by public or private elementary, secondary, and college level educational institutions. There's also private events, which I think we've just defined as things that don't have public invitations. So then I have to ask, does that mean that I can have a private event and not worry about how many people come to my backyard?
So to answer that question, there are various factors of an event that increase liability, that are known to increase liability. Number of people, presence of alcohol, high risk type of, you know, if you're having like bull riding in your pasture, things like that. So this form was essentially modified slightly from a template provided by WCAA that they have determined addresses the types of concerns that they see with liability for special events. So it's not like we just kind of got together and thought up what we thought should be in here. And obviously some of these we may never have here. But it's a non-exhaustive list. It's intended to be specific enough that a person can understand when they need to apply for a permit, but vague enough that if somebody comes up with an idea we've never thought of, it will fit under here, and maybe it won't. We'll have to amend the code. In regard to liability, we have the public duty doctrine. So yes, is it our duty as the city to try to assure public safety? Yes. But a duty to everyone is a duty to no one in particular, right? That's why the public duty doctrine exists. So, you know, yes, could we go to an event and say, oh, well, we didn't know this event was happening and now half of our park is burned up because they had fires, and we'll prosecute them for that, but it's too late, right? The whole idea of the permit is we know the risks ahead of time. We try to make them mitigate the risk. And part of that is they have to get insurance. They have to indemnify the city to try to mitigate risk as much as we can. We'll never alleviate it completely.
So, yeah, and I'm okay with that for public properties, right? I mean, roads, even easements, parks for certain, city hall, the fire station. Those are all things that we should have complete control over who uses them and for what. My backyard is another concern. So I'll tell you an event which we have held in the past with my scout troop is we've had a backyard camp. There are times when the troop swells up to 32 kids. By the time you get a parent with each one of them, or two, you're up to pushing 50 people. Now, we don't usually know until like Friday afternoon how many are going to actually show up. Does this mean that's so I guess I asked a question before. So if I have an event in my backyard, whether it's a birthday party or backyard camp out or Groundhog Day celebration, do I have to go to the city and ask for a permit to do that if I expect there's a reasonable expectation that more than 50 people will show up?
No, that would fall under 516.030 B, private events as exemptions. Private events not open to the public that do not impact public health or safety, traffic, sanitation, emergency services, or other necessary services. So, you know.
Okay. Good, thank you. I would like to just make sure that got on record. That's a very important thing. I think most citizens that read this, just like Ken's concern about being able to have a church dance. I mean, I don't think we've thought of all the possibilities. I will say I don't like the way this is written. I was on the subcommittee. I have reviewed it. I've thought of as many events that I can think of that could be a hiccup, you know, where this could have an impact that we don't want it to have an impact on. I did agree with subcommittee that I think it's passable. I will restate though, I really don't like the way it's written. The way it's written is the way I've seen legislation written in countries that I don't want to live in, where it restricts everything and then gives you exemptions. so that in the future, very easily, the exemptions can be stricken. And that's what happens in the course of tyrannies, and I don't like that at all. But right now, as it stands, as far as I can tell, all of the necessary exemptions to allow us to function as a community are in place. So I just want to make sure I stated all of that, because it is a serious concern and I didn't like the direction it's going. I also am interested in knowing, I asked the question to the subcommittee, you know, what do all the cities that don't have this insurance company do? How do they cover themselves? Are they, and how have we survived so long without it? I agree that maybe there's a reason to address this, but I am one that will not take the fact that some insurance organization has written an ordinance and say that we should just take it as gospel. I have a lot of critiques on this. And I'm just saying that we should not, as a council, in general, just take a previously written ordinance that's been accepted by I don't know how many dozen other communities and just consider it to be good without reviewing it ourselves, which I think we did. But again, I wouldn't have written it this way, but my concerns are covered. Okay, so there you go. That's just a little probably undesired monologue on my thought process. But I just want to approach this with real caution, and I want to let our citizens know that this was approached with caution and that it was reviewed. And I think that as it stands, it's acceptable. So I'll leave it at that. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Councilmember Smart. And before I turn to Councilmember Bloom, I will just make some comments because I sat in that subcommittee along with Councilmember Fetto, and we did have very pointed and sometimes very strong discussions with regard to this topic. However, I do believe that our responsibility as council extends in many different directions, some of which you pointed out, Councilmember Smart, and some of which Councilor Foltz pointed out as our city attorney, that we do have a public duty doctrine, that we need to take reasonable steps to ensure the safety of our citizens. And my belief is the focus of this document is that when we have large gatherings in a public setting that may involve activities that we can't foresee, automobiles, so forth, other events, that we need to take appropriate action. And I do like the fact that the exemptions are spelled out at the beginning, so that as someone reads this, they can immediately see where they may be exempt from having to comply with this. But I just wanted to make my comments on it, and I do support its passage. Councilmember Bloom.
I guess I was trying to, I'm trying to picture the things that we're trying to protect against and what we can't protect against. But one thing that's missing from this ordinance is consequence. What if I don't get a permit? I mean, there's no fine. There's no, what's, can the police come arrest somebody if they can figure out who's organized this? I can imagine a flash mob coming up with hundreds of people. Somebody decides, hey, I got a band. You can come up to my uncle's house up there and we're going to have a great party. And it gets put out on social media. And now what do? They didn't get a permit. Chief?
Yeah, I have not read this document at all. I haven't seen it at all. So I can't, if we go to scenes and there's a crime, people get arrested for crimes. But as far as the ordinance goes, I'd have to take a look at this document and see what it even says.
But you get my drift.
There is a section in here, 516-130, revocation of permit.
Right, but there isn't a one. I revoked it, but it didn't exist.
Well, yeah, that's true. Essentially, in my view, and I think the chief could weigh in on this, if somebody has a permit revoked, maybe we do need to look at what happens if they don't get a permit and they're having an unpermitted event. I mean, primarily we tell them you have to leave. This event required a permit. And if they refuse to leave, they can be charged criminally for trespassing. Obviously, we don't want to go there. We would rather people just agree to leave on their own, but I've not really had that in my experience. I handled special events in Kennewick. We generally the events that are big enough to need this permit have stuff pretty well lined out. They can look, they know what they need to do. And they work with the city accordingly, partially because they know if they don't, they won't get to come back, right? If they're wanting to use a facility or a park especially. And then obviously if it's on private property, we may have other issues, noise ordinances, things like that. So.
I agree. The first thing I thought of was the trespassing from city property, if they're not complying with whatever that is. But again, I haven't read this, so, but trespassing is one of those things that we do. If we don't get compliance at city park, I could trespass you from the park, so.
I'll turn to Councilmember Stoker since he hasn't spoken yet on this.
Oh, I've spoken, but, so anyway, so if I go back.
Time around then, excuse me.
If I just take this then and I look at B's exemptions again. So it says as long as it does not impact public health or safety, traffic, sanitation, emergency services, or other necessary services, it's on private property. So like my example of a church youth dance, the church facility already has sufficient parking spaces. It already has sufficient restroom services. You know, most of the time they're indoors. So we're not talking about noise ordinances. So in that case, even if I have 1,000 kids there, this doesn't require a permit. So if I have that clearness in this, then I'm all for it. But, you know, I struggle just to make sure that that is accurate and that we're good to go.
I would say yes, although I think then your concern is, are you overbuilding capacity? Right? I mean, part of these exemptions are built because there are certain facilities that are meant to have large numbers of people, schools, churches, right? They're safe for that amount of people. They have the appropriate number of restrooms. All of that is dealt with when they're built. So this is really, you know, situations where someone has like a wine tasting venue and they have 400 people come there to hear an acoustic guitarist and there's not enough parking and it's causing a huge nuisance. So yeah, in your situation, I mean, I think you do need to pay attention to other codes that could be violated. If the building capacity is 200 people and you have 1,000 people there, you're gonna have other problems. But
I'm just wondering if there's a way we can include that type of language to help people understand when they're going through this, that, oh, well, I don't need this if my facility can accommodate the event. Because initially, when I read through this, I'm sitting here thinking, oh, great. I've got more than 100 people at my event, and now I need to have security services to help patrol it. When the nature of the event doesn't necessarily indicate that I need to have that kind of thing. But it's outlined in here that 100 or more people, I need to have such things. So if maybe we had a little bit more in here that helped us understand, you know, if the nature of your event or the nature or your facilities you're using can accommodate everything, you don't need to come forward to ask for a permit. Granted, I see it's only $25 based on what we passed in the consent agenda, but still, you don't want to be in violation either.
Councilmember Smart.
Yeah, so it's not the amount of the fee, it's the time frame that you must apply that was a little bit bothersome to me, right? There was this 60-day, the city can take up to that long to provide you with the permit. So, but here's one of the saving graces in this ordinance. It's in 16.100 under the permit fee. Now here's the rub though. It says under G, no fee shall be imposed when prohibited by the First and 14th Amendment to the United States Constitution or the Washington Constitution. Political or religious activity intended primarily for the communication or expression of ideas shall be presumed to be a constitutionally protected event. Factors that may be considered in evaluating whether or not the fee applies include the nature of the event, the extent to which the fee creates an unreasonable burden upon constitutionally protected activities, the extent of commercial activity such as the sales of goods, foods, and services, product advertising or promotion, or other business participation in the event, the use of the application of any funds raised in the conduct of previous events. So, okay, so what this does is it says that, you know, if you have a, let's just characterize it as an innocent religious event, Bible study or something like this, or you have, you know, some political party that wants to get together, that you won't be charged a fee, but it doesn't prevent you from you still have to get a permit though, is that right? If it's gonna fall under, you know, over 50 people or.
So, yes, so this is primarily getting at, there's case law about if your event is primarily like a First Amendment event, like it is truly for the expression of ideas, if you're unable to afford the permit or insurance, things like that, that's a prior restraint on speech, right? If you truly can't afford it, the law says that we may have, depending on the facts, we may have to give you alternatives such as you have to indemnify the city. We want you to take these risk mitigation measures in lieu of the insurance or the permit fee.
But still, although there may be no monetary fee, if, and I gave a ridiculous example to the subcommittee and I won't repeat it here, but if there's a reason for, should bring up a smile, see, I got him to laugh. If there's if there's some onerous or terrible event and people decide they want to get out and, you know, march against this or something, who knows? Express their First Amendment rights en masse. According to this, they will be able to be rounded up and dispersed if they don't get a permit. They might not have to pay a fee, but they have to wait for, I think, what was that? Was it 7 days? Was there a 7-day clause in there? Yeah.
Yep.
Up to 7 days before they can get out with their picket signs. So now if they keep it under 50 people, which I don't see how, you know, how anybody would have control over a situation like that. But if they keep it under 50 people, then I think they're good because they wouldn't need a permit. Is that my understanding? Is that a correct understanding? But if they're over 50 people or have any reasonable expectation of being over 50 people, even if they go to Flat Top Park, which could hold hundreds of people, they have to apply for a permit. The city could make them wait for 7 days, act as the judge as to whether or not any of these things apply, whether they need to pay a fee or not, whether or not they are going to disrupt public services while they do this. So there's a lot of considerations made. And then finally, when the city gets back to them a week later, they get to say, yeah, you can go ahead and have your demonstration, or no, you can't. Or you can, but you're now considered a business or something, and we're going to make you pay a permit and have police protection and all of the rest. Is that the right reading?
So, yes, I mean, we have timelines in the ordinance, but it does allow the responsible official to allow a later filing depending on the circumstances. The reason these timelines are in there is because generally, that is a reasonable amount of time for the city to conduct a thorough review between departments of what it's going to take to ensure the event is safe.
And for normal events, that makes sense. It's the abnormal ones where it looks like this could be construed as a method to constrict citizens' First Amendment rights that concerns me. And so, but
If I may chime in for
yeah,
just a
please go
moment,
ahead.
please. And I know we brought this up in our subcommittee discussion, but it's section 120 that I pointed out that there is an appeal process throughout the entire stage here. And I think that that's an important aspect of this. And the appeal can go right up to the city council. So us, as the governing body for legislative matters, would make a final decision if an individual appeals it. So I saw that as an important addition to this.
thank you for bringing that up. It is a very important addition. It doesn't solve the 1 week timeline for the previous topic I was talking about, but thank you for bringing that up, because that is, I always like to bring up that the city council should always have the option to, weigh in on a citizen's request to waive or have a variance. So anyway, that's just another thing I'll point out that's a concern. I personally don't plan to participate in any rowdy demonstrations, and I don't like them. I mean, I certainly don't like what I've seen in recent years, in big cities around the nation, which have been abhorrent and unruly and terrible. But what if they were not unruly? What if they were 1,000 people walking down Main Street for 20 minutes just to make a point, and they didn't vandalize, and they didn't catch things on fire, and they didn't hurt each other? Are we disallowing that potentiality from happening in our country with this ordinance?
Thank you, Councilmember Smart. Councilmember Bloom?
I guess, I mean, some of my concerns are addressed by section 1620, permit required, except I guess I'm looking at it that we're missing one word in almost all of them. Public. It's a public concert. We define public dance. We don't define a public concert. A public outdoor music festival. I don't know what the difference between a public outdoor music festival and a public concert. A public parade. Okay. Athletic competition. And then we sort of walk around whether there's a demonstration. I guess that, and then what the chief says, he hadn't had a chance to look at this. So I'm playing with the idea of maybe we should table this for 2 weeks. It's not going to kill us. And possibly revisit this. I mean, I don't know. I'm just throwing that out there.
Of a first and second reading?
All right. Counselor Foltz, do you have any other comments to make at this point?
I just wanted, in response to the question about public, in 516.020, being on public property or open to the public is one consideration as far as things that we need to regulate. Because there may be private events that impact public property, even though they don't occur on public property. So that is the reason why it doesn't say public. But that doesn't mean that every private event is going to need a permit, right? There is that exception for that reason. But we need to be able to recognize that if someone decides to have some huge event on their private property, and it's causing, mass traffic problems or other issues, they need to get a permit for that, just simply based on the impact.
Plan to have one.
Right.
Okay. Yep, you made your, Councilmember Moran.
Thank you. I'm just trying to make sure I see what exactly the concerns are, because it seems like in regards to 20, when it talks about public dance, concert, outdoor music festival, there's definitions there that state what those are. So a concert specifically is any music festival, dance festival, rock festival, or similar, where music is provided when members of the public are invited or admitted with or without charge. And then public dance has a very specific definition as well, also in 5.16.040. So I'm wondering if there is any way that we would be able to, at this point, state, okay, these very specific things maybe might need to be worked on, but overall, it feels like this is a sound ordinance. Just maybe it needs a little bit of tweaking to add something maybe in the future for what to do if there is no permit requested in the first place and there needed to be one. Is that reasonable?
That was my initial comment, but we got into demonstration. We define a demonstration, but it's not something that requires a permit. I mean, it's not in 20. So I I'm sorry, but my thing just died.
No, well, it's specifically the exemption is demonstrations that don't interfere with safe and normal use of public right of way. So if there is a demonstration and it does interfere with the normal use of public right of way, then it isn't exempt.
Right, but you see, I'm talking about 20 is what we define what should have a permit, right? And then we give exemptions for things that don't have a permit. There isn't a one-to-one type of aspect when you go.
Rather than have back and forth conversation between council members, I might ask Councilor Foltz for any comment in regard to that.
I feel like I have to put this up when I'm talking, which I probably don't need to, but I have one now, so I'm proud. So this permit required is essentially meant to be just very quick and to the point. Special event permits will be required, but not limited to the following event categories. So public dance, concert, outdoor music festival, parade. Further down, when it goes into the definitions, it expounds upon what is meant by that, right? But also it further limits, for example, a demonstration is 50 or more people. If you have a demonstration under 50 people, it's not a demonstration under the statute. So that is not necessarily meant to define we could define all the terms there. But it's a quick reference for someone to say, oh, is my event a public dance, a concert, a parade, an athletic? Oh, it is. So I need to go look at what that's defined as. That's a pretty common, in my experience, way that statutes and ordinances are written to make it easy for people to read initially. So I guess that's my 2 cents on that.
All right, thank you. I see no other comment at this point, so I'm going to ask council for a vote. The motion is second. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, say nay.
Nay.
I'm gonna be a delayed aye. Sorry. It just took me a while
All right.
because I didn't put my
Record-
sign up, but
we-
we're closed.
We record your vote as aye.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you.
And just look at 16030, which has the first sentence is very
But-
clarifying.
All
Thank
right,
you.
but this matters. Yeah.
Closed, yes,
Yes.
sir. Sorry.
Thank you, Councilmember Smart. All right, no problem. All right, so we're going to move on to, let's see, we're at Resolution 6224, amending master fee schedule for sanitary sewer service charges. Public Works Director Roscoe Slade will present the staff report, please.
Thank you, Mayor Pro Tem Brink. Council, about every 6 years, we do a comprehensive dive into our rate models, and the sewers model is no different. The last time we did a comprehensive dive with it is in 2016, where we had consultant assistants to go through, look at the assumptions, plan out expenditures and revenue for the next 10 years. The idea is to update our general sewer plan. We started that in 2021, and when that got far enough through, the idea was to do the rates. So you can see we're on about an 8-year. We've kind of missed the boat with it. And a lot that has to do with the Lewis and Clark master plan and looking at impacts and how that affects the sewer. So it took a little more time to get through it. The goals that we do with our rate models, again, is to maintain current monthly sewer rates while meeting Department of Ecology requirements, maintain sewer operation reserve equal to 2 months of operation and maintenance plus debt service coverage, maintain sewer emergency reserve of 800,000, and if the rate increases are needed, spread out over several years to mitigate the financial impacts and ultimately ensure the financial security of the utility. So one of the things that delayed this was the consultant that we had hired to help with the rate model part of it retired at the end of 2022. And so with Ms. Gwynn's other duties as finance director and her staff took it on with Public Works to update and do the comprehensive dive. The other thing that occurred is the barcodes from the state auditor changed. And so the whole rate model was formatted to match that. So when we do budgeting, it's all in alignment. So it should be easier for budgeting at staff level, putting this together. So a lot of work went into this, and thank you, Aaron, on your staff time going through it. In the staff report, I give you the history of where we were with our sewer rates and the last time we raised it. Remember early at the end of 2023, we did a CPI. We hadn't increased the rates for the last 2 years while we were finishing this up. What is proposed is you can see the next 6 years, we're looking at setting sewer rates from 2025 through 2030, even though that's 6 years, but we've planned out the next 10 years. But when you get past 6 years, you know, the numbers, the accuracy, you know, is not there. And as in past, the last 25 years, the promise that staff I give you is this rate model is reviewed annually by the finance department. And we go through that annually every year. So while we're asking you to update or increase rates over the next 6 years, when we do that annual update, if it's determined not to be needed, meaning we spent less than we anticipated, or maybe revenue came in more than we anticipated, just like we've done, I think at least twice that I can remember, we've come back to you and pushed out that rate, it basically delayed that rate increase for a later date. And so that's the promise I'll give you going forward with this. Guys, rate increases are less than 1.8%. So you're looking at less than the CPI. I think last one I saw from August to August was 3.1. Again, like to say we're being efficient, but there was also some debt service that went away in the rate model. We are still transferring connection fees that we get out of the sewer for new development is going into the 401 fund to pay debt service that deals with new capacity. So our treatment plant expansion. You know, you've been here a while when you get to pay off a 20-year Public Works Trust Fund loan. So that's next year, that treatment plant expansion will be paid off. The good news is just kind of how we planned it. Pay off debt, so you're ready for the next expansion, which will be forthcoming with that treatment plant. Some of the other highlights that we went through is making sure the emergency reserve also, we're putting money aside for large equipment. We haven't got to the point where we can do all the trucks and everything, but we do have the Vector truck, probably $600,000 plus, the sewer camera truck, and those type of things. We're putting aside money, so when they have to be replaced, the majority of that is covered. And because of the maintenance guys taking care of their equipment that's purchased, we had them on a 10-year cycle. The Vector's actually getting extended out 14 years, and the sewer camera truck out 12 years because they've taken good care of it. Even though we said we're going to replace it every 10, if it's still good, we're going to continue to push that out. I already talked about the transfer in the sewer department. There wasn't a lot. In 2030, they're looking at another maintenance body. This may be a lab tech. We're looking at bringing the testing back in-house rather than consult out for it. We had done that previously, but when the lab flooded and we had to, we got away from that. We're looking at possibly with the next expansion of the treatment plant to look at adding that capacity back in there to do it in-house. And I'd say one of the larger things that came back in the general sewer plan was a deep dive at our sewer repair and replacement program. And this is looking at the older part of town where you have old AC concrete piping. And we set up a process to go through a matrix on just because it's old doesn't mean it needs to be replaced. So we set up some criteria that really looked at what happens if it fails? What is the, I'd say a sewer line in a cul-de-sac that may affect 8 homes is not enjoyable or fun to deal with. But if it was my interceptor that collapsed that served a couple thousand people, that's a different level. And so they went through and used age, pipe condition, severity, if it were to have an issue, to put together a sewer replacement thing. And so in the past, the city was investing about $75,000 a year. And the report came back, said we need to be closer to $400,000 a year. And that increases as you go out. And so that is also included in your rate model. So that program was able to be in with minimal increases. Again, being able to plan out 10 years, you can spread out these things without having large increases in the rates. This was reviewed by the Utility Committee, which consists of council members Smart, Hayes, and Mayor Pro Tem Brink, back on September 17th. And so what you have before you is a resolution that would set the monthly sewer rate from 2025 through 2030 before you.
All right, thank you, Mr. Slade. Seeing still no one in our council chambers, is there anyone attending virtually who'd like to provide a comment? If so, please raise your virtual hand. City Clerk will unmute you and you will have 3 minutes to provide your comments. Please state your name and address for the record, and you may also press *9 to raise your hand via telephone. I see no one attending virtually who wishes to comment. Do you see anyone, Stephanie?
I do not.
Seeing no one, council, do we have a motion on this matter?
I move to adopt Resolution 62-24, amending master fee schedule for sanitary sewer service charges.
Second.
Have a motion and a second. Any discussion? Councilmember Moran.
I just had a quick question for you, Mr. Slade. I didn't think about it then, but I just noticed that for the Vector truck and for the sewer camera vehicle, I noticed that the timeline of 10 to 14 years into 12 years was extended, but when are they actually due? Like, where are we at in that timeline for those? Do you know?
Yeah, so both we're in this budget cycle. So so the Vector truck would have been in 2026, is now 2029, or excuse me, 2025, and now is 2029 for the Vector. And the sewer camera, I believe, was in 2024 and has been pushed out to 2026.
Thank you.
Councilmember Bloom.
So the loan on the sewer plant is being, how much of that is reflected in, was being paid off by the sewer rate? I mean, $1, I guess. So, I mean, some of your overall, we'll probably have a greater discussion when we do the budget, look at the budget more in detail, but, that was how much a month as a percentage of your sewer?
Yeah, I want to say the treatment plant was probably $250,000 annual debt service.
Okay.
And again, we were transferring funds out of the sewer connection charges, the 442 fund, into the 401 to pay for the debt for the new capacity.
But so this all goes into the operating side of it?
Yeah, because the debt is paid out of the operating side of the sewer utility. And so the other debt that's being transferred in is about $128,000 a year for the I plant. So those fees that we're collecting from the wineries that discharge to it, we're taking those and rolling them into the 401 fund to pay the debt service on the I plant. So the residents aren't paying for that debt service.
I guess just from a public perception, it's that utility bill coming every month that is, that's what they see they're paying the city, and to maintain it, and they don't recognize that it's not the general fund. Now, that's not paying for, but they're seeing that going up, and, I guess it's small, but that just keeps hitting them on the monthly basis. And I look at what, if we try for a levy lid lift, that's all part and parcel, but.
All good comments, and that's why I believe last year we actually increased the low-income senior and low-income disability they're paying only 45% instead of 50% of the normal rate. So we've tried to offset some of these increases by giving a bigger discount to those people in need.
Right, but this rate is proportionally across the board, no matter whether you're in a $2 million house or a $250,000 condo, you're paying this rate every month.
Yep, you're gonna pay, your bill you
Progressive.
receive in February will be $1.10 more a month, which is 1.8% more than you're paying this year.
Being no other comments, call for a vote. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed, say nay. Motion passes. Next, we have Resolution 60-24 proclamation request for Hindu Heritage Month. It's a resolution which Councilmember Smart requested to be removed from the consent agenda. So I'll start with you, Councilmember Smart, if you would make your comments, please.
We need a motion first or not? No? Yes?
Should I get a motion first?
I think typically when we have an item removed from the consent agenda, we start with the
Then we'll
like, sort of an
entertain a motion.
initial like
So,
reasoning for why
yeah,
it was
make your
removed. And then-
comments.
Glad to.
Thank you.
Yes, so I asked for this to be removed. I will just read the two sentences that I wrote to our mayor about this resolution. I want to first state that, I mean, I have best friends who are Hindus. I have best friends who are Catholics. I have best friends who are Mormons. I have all sorts of people. There's no discriminatory bone here in this comment whatsoever. I want to make it perfectly clear. Okay. However, I find the language in this proclamation to be unnecessarily polarizing. In addition, I disagree with the concept that religious groups should be given special recognition by city government without declaring equal status for all religions, which would be an onerous thing to do and unnecessary given our constitutionally protected rights. So what I see this as a slippery slope of, I can't count the number of religions in the world. I could probably cite a dozen of them, and so could all of us here. But I'm really not looking for the city of West Richland to start a tradition of proclaiming one month after another to, venerate a particular religious group. It's not that I hold anything against them. I just don't see it as an appropriate action for city government to purposefully bring out, because you can bet that if we do this, you'll have the Presbyterians will be next, and the list will go on. And I have to ask why. Let me address the first part of my statement, though, which is that there's language in here that I wasn't particularly happy with, and it's going to take me a moment to scroll back. Sorry. So it's on page 94, 92, if I can get to that. Sorry. Is there a faster way to do that? I don't see that now. I've got it open in Adobe, but so, oh my goodness. Do you have it? Okay. I will borrow Councilmember Stoker's. So just to point out, I don't really like the concept in general, like I just stated, but then we are, memorializing statements like, despite their positive contributions, Hindu Americans face stereotypes and misconceptions about their heritage and have been the targets of bullying, discrimination, hate speech, and bias-motivated crimes. Well, so has every other single race, religion, creed in this country. And if you don't believe that, you go back in the history books. Everyone, Italians, Irish, the Brits, of course, you name it. Everybody's had this. And I just think it's a very negative thing to do, to make a proclamation that memorializes such of a statement. I don't see it as necessary. I don't agree with it whatsoever. Nasty parts of our history and even our current society today, we need to get over it. This is a divisive document, in my opinion. It divides us instead of brings us together. And there may be a few people of this group that are asking for it, and I understand that. But I call myself to a higher level of logic and ask, is this really what city government should be doing? So I'd be happy to discuss it further, but I am not for this or any other proclamation that upholds any particular religious group because I think it's inappropriate. So that's my point.
Thank you, Councilmember Smart, for your thoughts on removing this from the consent agenda. Council, do I have a motion so we can discuss this further?
I move to approve Resolution 6024, a resolution of the City of West Richland, Washington, authorizing adoption of a proclamation proclaiming October as Hindu American Awareness and Appreciation Month.
Second, so we can have discussion.
All right, we have a motion and a second. Councilmember Moran, I'll start with you.
Thank you very much. I do hear what Councilman Smart is saying, but I will go to, at the very least, the procedure that we have for the proclamations, and there is nothing in it stating what is not allowed. It's open to anyone, so if anyone of any religion would like to, they can. And at the very bottom of the proclamation procedure, it does state that, where is it? I just had it, hang on. It basically is saying that whatever the proclamation may say doesn't mean that, crap, I cannot find where the text was. Either way,
If you'd like, I'll come back to you, Councilmember.
yes, let me find it.
All right.
Thank you.
I'll turn to Councilmember Bloom.
She was getting my curiosity of what was in our proclamation. I guess ordinance, I guess I look at West Richland as probably one of the most diverse communities, having the only mosque and having the Hindu society. And I agree with Councilmember Smart that we're open this up, and maybe we need to revisit our proclamation aspect of when do we turn down proclamations, because, you know, we could ask, you know, declare it Butterfly Month or something of that nature. So I mean, I don't oppose the proclamation. I don't oppose aspect of you know, recognizing struggles of any of the various religious groups. But, you know, I think this proclamation, this request shows that we might be a little bit over the board for proclamations. And I think I would ask Councilmember Hayes to sort of jump into this, because you've done some of the proclamation aspects before, and I guess we might want to visit what's the purpose of the city creating a proclamation, and that might be something that we look at. Thank you.
Councilmember Stoker.
Yes, thank you, Mayor Pro Tem. So I went and tried to do some Google searches on this myself. From what I see, this is maybe a grassroots efforts to try and get something going, because this is it's not like Black History Month or other ones that are federally recognized already. So I'm kind of struggling with this as well. I'm kind of in agreement with Mr. Smart and Mr. Bloom on that. But right now I don't see that this is something coming, shall we say, top down. It's more bottom up. And do see that there were some other cities that had done this. I think Bothell was one of the ones that came up. But I think I'm in support of not going down this slippery slope.
Thank you. Councilmember Moran?
Thank you. I did find it. It's actually at the beginning of the proclamation and key to the city policy and procedure. The first paragraph discusses proclamations, and the last two sentences say proclamations are strictly honorary and they are issued as a courtesy. In addition, they are not legally binding and do not constitute an endorsement by the city of West Richland. And basically, my thoughts on this are anybody can submit one. We've seen them submitted by a multitude of different types of people. They're mostly within the consent agenda. They don't really cost anything to the city. It's a good thing to acknowledge the fact that, yes, there are Hindu Americans, and yes, just like many other groups of people that have immigrated here, whether by force or otherwise, everybody is acknowledged, and we can do that because it doesn't cost us anything. So at the very least, you know, especially since we do have the Hindu Center here and we do have the mosque here in West Richland, I feel like this is our way to celebrate the fact that we have diversity. What other cities in the Tri-Cities has both a mosque and a Hindu temple? I don't see anybody else doing that. So I think we should celebrate our diversity by approving this. It's an easy win.
Thank you, Councilmember Moran. Councilmember Hayes?
I agree with and the ones I've dealt with throughout the years with the Chamber of Commerce businesses, and we always make, you know, when we do the ribbon cutting and proclamation, that's that business's day, and it's really important to a lot of people. And I see with all the different, even if you bring up all the religions, bring them up. I mean, we are very blessed in this community to have such a vast level of diversity. So it's like, I don't see starting a war over who gets a proclamation or not. So it's a very positive thing, and it's a welcoming thing to the community and to the religions to know that they're part of our community.
Councilmember Fetto?
Thank you. You know, I'm in agreement as well. I don't have a problem celebrating the diversity and doing this. To Councilmember Smart's point, I do not like, however, the last whereas. Everything in here is very positive, and that just feels out of place and giving weight to those stereotypes and to the stuff that's happened here recently in town. I would be open to approving this. However, I would suggest we remove that. It takes away from all the positive that we talk about throughout this whole document. And then we get back there, they face stereotypes, misconceptions. I see we use this as an opportunity to teach versus an opportunity to take down. I also have friends that are Hindu and Muslim, and I've learned a lot of things about, I'm Catholic by birth. Haven't been part of any other religion. So when I meet people of other religions, I try to take that time to learn. And anyway, I'm all for this. I don't mind. I look forward to Catholic Appreciation Month. But I don't like that last whereas. That's all I would say.
Before I turn to you again, Councilmember Smart, I'll just add my comments. I do, in general terms, support the proclamation. I do take note of Councilmember Fetto's comments with regard to the last paragraph. However, I think it is key to this city, to our city, that we show a welcoming attitude toward everyone. It's up there on our values, right up there, that we are a welcoming city. And to decide to change our proclamation process or to take exception to our proclamation process should not be done in this form, but should be done separately. If we need to change the process or change the criteria for doing that, that should be a separate discussion. I don't think, though, that it should that discussion or that approach should be carried over onto tonight's request for issuance of a proclamation. I think that might be a future action, but I wouldn't hold a group of individuals at hostage, so to speak, because we've decided that we might need to change the policy. That's another discussion for another day. So I'll leave it at that. I do support this. I'm willing to consider making the change, though, as Councilmember Fetto suggested. Councilmember Smart.
Yeah, thank you, Councilmember Fetto. I appreciate those comments, and that was what, you know, like I said, I have the two complaints. One, I'm not sure we really want to do this for every religious group out there. And two, that it really sounded divisive, especially the last paragraph. The other, like you said, the other paragraphs are positive and factual, as far as I can tell. And the lower one may be factual as well, but I just really disdain the idea of our city putting a rubber stamp of any kind on such a statement. I am all for uniting us. People talk about celebrating diversity. I celebrate unity from myself. I mean, that means that the Muslims and the Hindus and the Mormons and the Catholics and the Baptists and the whole batch of them, you know, get together and are Americans, right? And that's what's most important in this country, I believe, and that we celebrate our unity as such. But I'm okay with, you know, the Hindus being a separate group. I recognize them. They're welcomed here. I appreciate the fact that they invested in our community and that they live here among us. I think it's very interesting. I've had very good friends who are Hindu and learned a lot discussing like what they believe and so forth. It's interesting. I don't hearken to their faith, but I mean, it's interesting, and I certainly don't disdain them for being here in any way, shape, or form. But those are my two complaints. I guess I agree with you, Mayor Pro Tem Brink, that I don't want to hold these folks hostage. You know, they came to us with, we've got a certain policy of rubber stamping proclamations. I think we do want to maybe change that. I will say that with what Councilmember Moran read as far as our policy on proclamations, that's not an approval per se, but is just a proclamation. I would, if we can change this and take out the last whereas, I would give this a thumbs up vote. But if not, I'm going to have to reject this one, and we'll let council decide. Thank you.
Councilmember Moran.
Thank you. And I understand, at least I believe I understand what people have issue with regarding the last whereas, but the way that I view it, and I'm fairly certain the way that the people that wrote this view it, is that when it comes to unity and all the things, you know, we stand together, we stand strong. However, because of our differences, we are also stronger. When you look at a group and it all looks the same, well, I could pontificate on that, but what I will say is that what I view this last sentence is, you know, despite positive contributions by this group of Americans who also are Hindu, they have faced terrible things that many other groups, yes, have. And we're not saying other groups haven't. We're just saying that they have had positive contributions. Negative things have happened to them, but we appreciate them no matter what, whether that's in spite of or because of. I don't think that removing that whereas is going to make anything other than it look like there might be a, dare I say, whitewashing of this proclamation. I feel like just the way it is fine, because you have to take the good with the bad, and this is actually a positive, I think, the last sentence is.
All right, thank you, Councilmember Moran. I'll turn to our city clerk. please.
Thank you. I just wanted to mention that the whereas is as written in the proclamation are as requested from their application for the proclamation. So all of the verbiage in the proclamation is based on the application that was submitted by the group requesting it.
Thank you. And I won't, to think that they've not been targets of bullying, discrimination, or so forth is naive, because I know that has occurred. Councilmember Feta.
Stephanie, does that mean that we don't have the authority to change it if we choose to?
I don't think that there's a limitation on that. I just historically, groups that have requested proclamations, not to say it's a copy paste, but essentially they submit to us the language that they would like in the proclamation, with the exception of the proclamations we do for businesses, because that's now a separate process. That's language that we've adopted as a city. But as far as these proclamations, because the city is not basically like it's I hate to say the rubber stamp, but it's what they've requested and we are acknowledging what they've requested. It's essentially the process.
All right. Counselor?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor Pro Tem. I just wanted to add, I did look, it looks like several cities in Washington have adopted this. However, it is not all verbatim. Some of them have changed the wording a little bit. So not that, that means that we necessarily need to, but I just wanted to be clear that, it's not, they're not all identical.
Councilmember Smart.
I just want to say that in my mind, that last paragraph, memorializes their victimhood. And in today's culture, I am not about that at all. I do not believe in the victim society. I believe in all the rest of these things that they've said are fantastic, in their group, but I am not, the city of West Richland's name is on this. Our name is on this, and I just don't endorse memorializing victimhood. We're Americans. We all have the same rights, constitutionally protected rights. That's why they can do this. That's why they're allowed here in the first place. Like any of us have freedom of religion. It's across the board. So I don't like the idea of West Richland memorializing victimhood.
All right, well, we have a motion to approve the proclamation first as presented. Is that correct, Stephanie, how I should take this? Councilmember Stoker.
Well, I guess then we need to look into whether or not we've had several voices speak up about removing that paragraph. So I think we should have a motion then if we want to consider that and put that to a vote of the council. So I move that we pass this as is with the removal of that last whereas and issue the proclamation that way.
Correct me if I'm wrong, but we need to address the motion that's currently on the table.
So
I
the
move
correct-
to amend the motion.
Yes,
then.
All right, yep,
that's correct.
there we go. And just go through the amendment one more time.
I move to amend the motion to amend the resolution to remove the last whereas for this proclamation.
I second that motion.
So we have a motion and a second to amend the proclamation to remove the last whereas. Is that correct? Yep. All right. So is there any discussion on this motion? Councilmember Moran?
I don't think this is a good look. I think that if we are going to start editing these things, it is going to look as if we are targeting people. And I really think this is a terrible idea to amend it to remove this. This is what the people that presented it specifically wanted it to say. We're not saying, yes, you're victims. We're acknowledging what they've stated and saying that, hey, we've been beat up, but you know what? We're here and we're glad we're here. And we, as a city, are glad that everybody is here. Please, let's not make this amendment. I don't want to be in the Tri-City Herald for being racist or anything, which could be skewed as that.
Councilmember Stoker.
Well, our own council here has already indicated there have been potential changes made in other cities within Washington state. So this isn't necessarily an unprecedented move. This isn't something that we are bound to accept. I think it's just as presumptuous then on any other front to consider that because we take out this paragraph, we're anything but what it actually describes in there. And I think we're all about celebrating who they are by keeping all the rest of it.
Councilmember Bloom.
Yeah, it's a proclamation of the city, and I guess I don't think the city should support the aspect of, proclaiming that, yes, they've all been, discriminated against, and I guess I'm in favor of the modification.
I'll make my comment. I was in favor of the modification, but I'm not so sure that I am at the moment, simply because there are a lot of groups that are discriminated against, and we see it, I see it every day. So I'm concerned a little bit that we're whitewashing this somewhat by not recognizing it. Now, there are certainly other groups. So we do have a motion to amend it. I've stated my piece. I see no other signs up. So I think we'll take a vote on that motion as amended. So all those in favor, go ahead,
So this vote would be to either to approve,
the amended version.
no, just to approve to amend it.
Yes, correct.
So not the final version as amended, but just if we want to amend it or not. So an
All right.
affirmative vote would be to amend, a negative or a nay vote would be to not amend the original.
Thank you. Council understand it? So I'll ask for a vote. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
All opposed, say nay.
Nay.
Nay. Councilmember Hayes, you voted nay. Councilmember Moran, and I voted nay. So the motion passes. We can amend it. No, 3-4, because you voted yay. Yep. All right, so now we will amend it. Yep. Which excludes the whereas paragraph, the final one, correct? All right. So I will call. No? Okay, all right. So I'll call for a vote to approve the proclamation as amended, removing the whereas paragraph, the final one. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
All opposed, say nay. All right, motion carries. All right, we made it through that. We have new business. Public Defense Caseload Standards Comment Letter. This is a request for the City Council support of a letter regarding the proposed public defense caseload standards to the Washington State Supreme Court. Council, hopefully you've had an opportunity to read the letter. Do I have a motion?
I move to authorize the mayor to send a comment letter regarding public defense caseload standards to the Washington State Supreme Court.
Second.
Motion and a second. Any discussion? Seeing none. Do I have, going to call for the vote? All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed, say nay. All right. We now have the second opportunity for citizen public comment. Seeing no one in this room, I'll turn to virtual attendees. If any of our 2 virtual attendees would like to make a comment, please raise your hand, virtual hand, or press *9. Seeing none. Do you see any, Stephanie?
I do not.
All right, we'll close the public comment period. We are now at staff and council comments. All right, Mr. Slade, I'll turn to you.
I'll make it quick. We're getting late. So the chief and I just wanted to recognize the staff that in West Richland that worked on the Ironman event. So for those of you that weren't paying attention on Sunday morning, we had 3,000 athletes bike through West Richland on Sunday, September 22nd. Jacqueline, our development services manager, and Commander Kelly were the 2 points of contacts for the city of West Richland. They spent 7 months coordinating the agreement that you approved for things with Visit Tri-Cities that we were going to be responsible for and pull off. They actually went above and beyond. They went through with social media, working with Stephanie to put maps out so that our citizens, residents knew where the easiest place to go, depending on where they were in the city, to go watch them and root for the athletes. They spent extra time putting together maps where our residents knew where you could cross at certain points. We didn't get the feedback that Richland did. So I think there's some lesson learned. They'll make some changes with that. But I think it had a lot to do with our staff just going above and beyond. And that's just, so kudos to Jacqueline and Commander Kelly. I mean, it was a smooth effort, and they didn't put the staff that we were planning on having. We actually end up using less. The only hiccup we had, solved by the chief, we had some state patrols didn't show up to their posts, but West Richland PUD's finest, including the chief, were out there to cover a few intersections. So it worked out well. Everybody's excited for next year's event. We'll be changing the route slightly because Van Geese will be under construction, but kudos to our staff. And like I said, I didn't receive a single.
You don't mind, I just want to add, and thanks to all the volunteer citizens. There was it several thousand? They count over 1,000? What's that? 1,100 volunteers. So thank you to the community for helping it, making this happen too.
All right, Mr. Mendenhall.
Thank you. I will also make my comments short. I would love to see each and every one of you this weekend out at the Red Mountain Event Center. There's going to be an awesome race event. If you haven't heard, it's the Fall Classic. This brings thousands of people to our community. It is a great event, lots of noise, lots of fun things going on. David's been there several times, almost, I think, every single one of them. Yeah, every race. And it's a fun event. If it's something that you would like to go to, please see me and I can make sure you get a special wrist bracelet to, not the kind the police chief or any of the officers walk around with, but
the metal ones.
But yeah, but some other bracelets that will get you into the event and be able to experience it up close and personal. So excited for that. Excited for the event being here in West Richland.
No other staff comments? All right, council comments. Councilmember Moran, I'll start with you.
Thank you very much. So on the 20th of September, I went to the Benton Franklin Council of Governments meeting, and we had a presentation by the Port of Benton. They gave specifically on the changes that are coming up to the railroads. And I will say that I was shocked when I found out that the railroads can have, in our area, cars up to 100 or lengths up to 100 cars long. And the fastest that they can go through crossings is 5 miles per hour. So that was, I think they calculated something to about 18 minutes for us to be almost entirely cut off from a way for folks to get from West Richland to the hospital. And of course, the council member from Kennewick spoke about how Kennewick is split in half as well, which that was a shame to hear as well. But I'm hopeful that once we have our railways upgraded, that they will be able to have cars going faster up to possibly 10, 15, maybe 20 miles per hour at the crossings, which would be greatly improved to maybe 4 minutes to go across. That does mean, though, that there are going to be some changes to traffic around railroad crossings. And hang on, I forgot to flip to that page. Let's see. So there are, sorry, wrong page. All right, so there are 4 rail crossings that are going to be replaced or repaired this year. The one by 240, there's one on Airport Way, which you've probably seen the signs for already coming up this weekend. Kingsgate Way crossing, there isn't going to be a road closing luckily. And then also on State Street, there is going to be a road closure there. But one of the things that we did speak about also, and I did contact Mayor Pro Tem Brink about, is the concern that I have regarding the fact that we, from what I understand, as a community, can't request that the rails even let us know when they're coming through. That sounded like it was a federal thing. And so I'm really concerned about that, especially when it comes to emergency preparedness. And we couldn't even have told them, hey, can you at least let us know if you're going to have a train coming through during Ironman? Which that could have been catastrophic based off of the number of people that were there, which also kudos to the city. I have also heard amazing things about Ironman. But that's just something that maybe we should look at and talk to other organizations, especially when it comes to emergency preparedness. Just to put that in folks' heads. One of the other things that I would like to, again, talk about, kind of switching gears, is that I think it would be really great for council to at least once a month have a workshop on an off Tuesday, especially since we have so many things that have built up in our parking lot for things to do. I think that it would be really great use of our off weeks in order to do that. So I would like to propose we discuss that, having the workshop at least once a month. And finally, it's a shame that I even have to mention it, but I have heard from several folks, and even our Mayor Pro Tem said that he had found it. There is some anti-Semitic flyers that have been placed on driveways, especially on South Lakes area. And our city is not a place. We do not have space for that hate. We are a welcoming city. It says so right up there. And we have all of the diversity you could, well, maybe not all of it, but we have a lot of diversity here. And so this level of hatred, and I don't know if folks have seen the flyer, but I'm not sure about the law specific to it, but it certainly feels like hate speech. But again, I haven't read through the law to know for sure what can be called hate speech. On a final note, I will say that I hope that people accept me for who I am. And if I say that I'm bruised, that they say, yes, I see you're bruised, but that they acknowledge me for who I am, even with those bruises, and don't just pretend like those bruises don't exist. And that's all I'll say on that.
Thank you, Councilmember Moran. Before I turn to my fellow council members, I just want to follow up on Council Moran's comments. This is an example of what was dropped in the driveways in the lakes area. It is abhorrent anti-Semitic material is what it is. And I agree with her comments that this type of literature, although it may be protected as free speech, is not indicative of our city, does not represent our city's values, does not represent our city's goals. So I would say this, that those individuals who are responsible for perhaps promoting or disseminating this type of information, that unfortunately you've chosen the wrong city to promote it in, because it just simply doesn't belong here. We are an accepting community, we are a welcoming community, and to be a healthy community, we have to make sure that we, as a city, do not tolerate this type of activity. So I'll leave it at that, and I'll turn to Councilmember Fetto.
Thank you. So I sit on the board for Visit Tri-City, so I've got some numbers our first board meeting was the Tuesday after the event. So 2,167 out-of-town athletes. They brought with them 5,417 guests for a total of 7,584 total visitors. Gonzaga University was down here monitoring, and they estimate between 7 and 7.5 million in direct spending in our economy. So although I found myself in the middle of the intersection of Van Giesen and 38th, trying to control chaos with Commander Coates, and although 6 or 7 individuals had some choice words, I served in the Navy and have heard almost all sorts of curse words, and I was surprised to learn a couple of new ones. So despite the handful of people who decided to take out their aggression on me in the middle of the intersection, this was fantastic for our community. So much so that the pre-sales were sold out and they had to reopen another round of pre-sale for next year's event. So to have these 7,500 people come in our community, spend their dollars in our hotels, in our restaurants, in our gas stations, in our convenience stores, and leave that money behind is a testament to how great of an event that was, and look forward to next year's event.
Councilmember Bloom.
I was going to follow up on Ironman. That qualify for an exemption under our public events aspect? I mean, you might want to look at that. And, you know, if there are changes to that ordinance that are needed, I think you revisit. I mean, it's, you know, any procedure that's not changed isn't being used. Since we have very little public, Mr. Mendenhall has decided to leave the Yakima Basin Fish and Wildlife Recovery Citizens Committee. So we have an opening coming up. So if anybody who wants to start chasing fish around and fish projects, just talk to me.
Councilmember Smart.
Yes, so I want to ask, I noticed that we passed this proclamation but didn't read it. Is it normal or should we read it? It's normal? Okay. All right, well, then I just want.
Someone here to see.
I see, okay. Understood. So I just want to comment on that, you know, I think that that's a fine proclamation. I'm glad we made the amendment. It's very positive. It's very enduring to the Hindu community here. And I hope that nobody takes that the wrong way. It was all of the best intentions to try to make it as positive and building as we can make it for both our community and that group. So those were my comments. Thank you.
Thank you. Councilmember Stoker.
Yes, so I just wanted to say, add my congratulations with how the Ironman was tackled. I shouted out my window to Chief as I went through bombing range in Van Giesen. He may not have realized that was me because he was busy and he did a quick turnaround. So, but that was great. I mean, I crossed up on Belmont at 7:30, so there was no issue at that point, but I came down Van Giesen or bombing range at 11:30. Again, towards the tail end, I didn't see any cyclists. I thought it was great. Compared to my wife's experience trying to get my son-in-law to work in Richland, she spent an hour and a half just trying to get to, you know, he works at AutoZone there, so on GW, and she tried going down to the Y, was redirected back up this way, was redirected again. It was just murder trying to get over there. So I thought, at least for me, it was easy getting through where we were at. So I appreciate all the effort that went into that. Thank you.
Thank you. Councilmember Smart, one last comment.
Yeah, so I just wanted to follow up on Councilmember Moran's comment on the train car. I've actually brought that up before, and I've talked to the chief about it. I've talked to the previous rail yard operators about this. I think you're right. They don't have an obligation. I think it is a terrible safety hazard. I have personally been stopped. I mean, I keep thinking back in the days when we were having kids. We would have had kids on Van Giesen, in one case at least. So I'm just saying that's a real problem and we should address it. And the fact that, you know, these routes were closed off during Ironman sort of, you know, brings that to light. But if the railroad has no obligation to tell us, we might try to just ask kindly if they would, whether they're obligated to or not. And after that, given the technology of the day, you know, let's put a trail cam out there with an alert on the chief's desk so that he knows when the trains are going by, so that if there's an ambulance call, they can make the right, make the right move. Because it's just not that hard of a technical problem. But it would be a very bad technical problem if somebody has driven all the way down Van Giesen with a heart attack victim or a pregnant mom to be in the passenger seat. Okay, and there's no way out. You either have to go all the way back around, or you could try to go down to the airport road, but it's blocked too because of the length of the train. So this, I mean, we need to solve this problem. This should be a this week kind of thing and get a plan in place so that our emergency services at least are aware when these trains are going by, blocking off our city entrances and exits.
Thank you, Councilmember Smart. I'll just close with the fact that I had a conversation today with Chief Carlisle with Benton County Fire District 4. He was aware of the problem. He stated that there are aspects of it which could present challenges when responding, especially for EMS medical calls. So I agree that perhaps a combined approach toward trying to resolve this is the best approach. So I'll leave it at that. And we will call us adjourned at 8:12 p.m. Thank you all for your patience and discussion this evening.